Welcome to episode 99 of The Route, presented by White Whale Marketing. The Route is a glorified sports business coffee chat that has a new guest every episode as they share their experiences and route in sports. I'm Christopher Nascimento, and let's get started. As always, just a few things to cover before we begin. First off, if you haven't already, you can see here if you're watching on video, just on the right-hand corner here. Check us out at The Route Sports. That's on all platforms, including LinkedIn. So if you're someone listening, you're someone in the industry, or someone trying to, grow your network, check us out there. Maybe connect with the people that we have on the podcast, and that can maybe get you going or even just help advance it. Additionally, if you haven't already, subscribe, follow to the podcast, whether it's on the audio or YouTube. Makes a difference just as it allows us to continue to grow. You can, leave 5 stars, leave a comment, or if it's on YouTube, etc. And all that stuff of engagement helps us. So please take the time to do that. And the last thing to cover before we get into today's episode is a little message from our friends at Bedstamp. So if you haven't heard yet and you haven't been up to date with the podcast, but let me tell you about Bedstamp. So for someone who likes to place a couple bucks, on their favorite team like me, you should listen up, right? So don't be a fool when, I have my buddies over, we're watching the game, I place a live bet, and then as soon as I go on my phone or, I start watching the intermission show, or my buddy tells me what they bet on, and then all of a sudden they get, better odds than what I just placed, right? So the solution is to use Betstamp to compare the best available odds amongst sports books. So the only way you're going to get an edge in online sports betting is by having an account with multiple sports books. So when you download the Betstamp app or go to betstamp.app/Ontario, use the code WHALE so you can get access to their affiliates and their prices. Betstamp allows you to verify the existence of a proposed bet with their corresponding odds, and this provides you to buy and sell picks with full transparency. Users selling picks on Betstamp do not sacrifice any royalty or cut to the app, so it's completely free, and that's always good stuff from there. So again, if you want an edge in sports betting, use the Betstamp app by downloading their app or visiting betstamp.app/Ontario and using the code WHALE to get access to all of their affiliates and their pricing. So now that that's done and that's covered and you're a little more informed about that, we can kind of get into today's guest. So I'd now like to welcome someone who has been all around the game of hockey and who at this time of the recording will be headed to the draft later this week. Assistant General Manager of the North Bay Battalion, Johnny Winstanley. Welcome to the Route. How's it going?
Great. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, of course. I always appreciate when people come on the podcast with their busy schedules. So as I kind of mentioned, right, you've been all around the game of hockey, and the way this podcast usually starts is just take me through your route, right? So where did it begin and how did we get to where we are today?
All right. So I guess we'll start back when I was about 18 or 19 years old. I was playing for the Sudbury Wolves in the Ontario Hockey League. Had a lot of growing up to do back then. If I knew now what I know, I could have been a much different person back then. Ended up playing junior at 20 years old and signing a professional contract in Laredo, Texas, of all places. And they played in the Central Hockey League, and back then they were a big powerhouse. So I got ready, went out to Laredo, Texas, showed up, didn't really know what to expect. And about 10 days into camp, I tore my groin pretty badly. So I had a choice. I was 21 years old, and I had a choice to either, fix my body and stay in Laredo on workers' comp and live with people that maybe I wasn't going to be around the team and stuff, or come home and try something new. And at 21 years old, I made the decision to come home and begin coaching. So I joined a Pee-wee team back then as an assistant coach. And that's where it all started. That's where my journey started at 21 years old. I coached this Pee-wee team for 2 seasons. I had some interesting people around me that taught me a lot about the game and helped me with some things that maybe I wanted to do and some things I didn't want to do. But the best advice I got was from one of the guys I coached with. And he said to me at 22, he said, "Do you want to be a head coach, or what do you want to do?" And at that point I said, "Well, I do. I want to be a head coach." So he said, "You know what? You need to go coach young kids." I said, "I don't want to go coach young kids. I want to coach older kids. I want to move up in the game. I want to coach junior." And he said, "But you need to learn to think about the game differently before you can become a head coach." So I took his advice, and I took a 7 and 8 year old hockey team, and I became the head coach at 22 years old of a 7 and 8 year old hockey team, which was a very interesting experience for me. That led to now 17 years of coaching.
Wow.
I was in Brampton minor hockey organization. Then I moved on to the Toronto Junior Canadiens. I've been with the Canadiens now for 14 seasons. I became the general manager of the Toronto Junior Canadiens 9 seasons ago. And I've been coaching all along the way. So I've coached right from 7 years old all the way up to midget hockey, and had some incredible players and incredible experiences along the way. So
Yeah,
that's
no,
kind of how it all started.
no, that's an incredible route. We're already from there. I got some questions, right? Where you're talking about Laredo, Texas, right? When you think about hockey, you don't always kind of think of Texas. Maybe
Yeah.
now more so the game growing, but how does that come about, right? Because obviously, I think you're saying maybe like 18 years ago. I'm trying to assume,
Yep.
or from timeline. How does that come about? How do you end up finding an opportunity in Texas? Is it your agent? Is it just through maybe coaching, or how did that come about?
Yeah, a lot of those teams back then, the Central Hockey League back then was a really high end league. They were
Mm-hmm.
competing with the East Coast Hockey League, and they had scouts and recruiters that were in the Ontario area that would look and try to find players. Laredo had won the championship in that league. I think 2 of the 3 previous years. Them in Colorado were the 2 big dogs out there. And just through my representation, yeah, he called me up one day, said, "You've got a bunch of offers. This is one in Laredo." I knew a player that was down there previously the year before, Adam Paymont. So I picked his brain a little bit and ended up making that decision. But it was a really interesting experience. Obviously, it was extremely warm. We were right at the Mexican border. I didn't know what to expect in terms of fans and the games. Our first game we played against the Mexican national team, actually, in an exhibition
Wow.
game. And there was 12,000 people at the game 4 hours before the game started.
Yeah,
So it
no,
was a pretty incredible experience.
yeah, no, that's crazy. I remember when I was a kid, I went to the Hockey Hall of Fame, and I'm from Portuguese descent. And we're just walking around, and then out of nowhere, I saw like a Portuguese national team jersey. Where it's always crazy to think that whether it's Portugal, Mexico, I know Jamaica, like even Italy. Maybe Italy's a little more prominent, but sometimes it's always like these crazy nations that end up having hockey teams, which
Yeah.
is always surprising. It's kind of cool to hear. And I guess from there, something that's pretty interesting, and something that I think is like a consistent theme in these podcasts is a lot of people when they're in their early 20s, they have like this, fork in the road, right? Like, hey, like, am I going to go this way or am I going to go that way? What kind of maybe, like, I know you kind of touched on the decision, but, at 21, 22, that's kind of a big decision to, let go of, the hockey dream or, being a player. What kind of other factors kind of came into it? Because I'm sure it wasn't just as simple as, oh, you know what, let me just end it.
Yeah, but as I kind of alluded to at the beginning, at 18, 19, I had a lot of learning to do. I think part of my decision to go down the coaching road was I was one of those young adolescent teens who always thought I knew better than my coaches, which wasn't the case. But I wanted to show that I did. And coaching was something that I actually got in the hockey school business at about 14 or 15 years old, just working with young kids. And I really enjoyed the teaching aspect. And I also found when I was still playing and I was teaching kids, it actually helped me as an athlete because I slowed down and I started to really think about the process of, teaching skating or teaching stick handling or shooting. And I found it to kind of become a little bit of my niche that if you slow things down and really analyze what you're doing, it made it a lot more enjoyable and a lot more of an experience as you went through the process.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Is that something like to this day that you're still even recommending to players coming up like, hey, like if you have the opportunity, maybe go help some young kids or go coach at a skills camp or different things like that, because then it almost puts you in a different position, right? Where rather than kind of focusing so much on doing something specifically, you're kind of almost taking a step back and almost going through a slower process of it.
Yeah, absolutely. For players, I always recommend that they do goalie school. If you're a shooter, go do goalie school because the goaltending position is very much, for the most part, a structured position. And for a shooter, you can just learn tendencies and you can work on your game while the goalies are working on their game. And it's such a huge advantage for players to do goalie school. I also love when kids do hockey schools, and fortunate enough now that I've got my own kids. So, I'm leaning on some of these kids that I've coached a little bit over the past, 10 years that are now 22, 23 years old to come back and start giving back and coaching my guys and having those experiences for themselves.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I guess kind of, going back to your route, right, where you kind of came to that decision, hey, I'm going to head back home and go coach. How does that get started, right? Because, that's kind of an interesting path to be like, hey, I'm in my young 20s, don't have, kids that are necessarily going to be playing on these 7, 8-year-old teams. So how does that begin? Is it something where you just simply go to the association, or how does that work out?
So I was fortunate in my last year junior, our ownership also owned the junior Canadians at the time. And he had a son on the team that I was eventually going to be assistant coach on. And the year before, I had done a bunch of lessons with his son, just working on scoring, working on stick handling. So that's where it kind of led to. And I had the ability, because they also owned a facility. So they owned a rink and a small 3-on-3 rink. So during the days, I would run private lessons with the owner's kids, with their friends. So I was constantly on the ice. And that was appealing to me because I was a young guy, still in good shape, and wanted to be around the game as much as I could. And it also helped me because I got to learn. I got to be on the ice with some incredible mentors and incredible people that I learned real early on that it's very important to listen and ask questions. And the minute that you think you know everything is when you don't know anything. So I've made that a big part of what I do and who I am. And I love, even now in my role with North Bay, being up there for games and just listening to the coaches talk about strategy, talk about how they're going to approach different things, talk about how they're approaching some of our athletes and how they're talking to them and some of the challenges that they're going through. So I love listening. I love asking questions, and I love just being around people that want to collaborate together.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. And I'm assuming that's kind of a big part of how you kind of been able to kind of go through that coaching ranks of, maybe going from, these 7, 8-year-olds kind of climbing to older kids, midget, which are a little more competitive, to even then breaking in with, North Bay. So how does that start coming about, right? Where you start transitioning from the 7,
Yeah.
8-year-olds to a higher group?
So my team that I took from 7 and 8, I took them all the way up. So I took them right till they were drafted to the OHL. So the interesting part about that is we were building the team and doing some great things. And in minor Pee Wee, we won the GTHL championship, and then came into Pee Wee, and the Toronto Marlies had a brand new coach, and it was Paul Coffey. So as I'm sure you can appreciate, that changed the landscape quite a bit. You've got a Hall of Famer, arguably one of the best defensemen to ever play the game, step in as the head coach of our rival team. So needless to say, he got some of the better players that went his way. So for the next 4 seasons, it was us and them going head to head. And for lack of a better term, they got the best of us for 3 of those seasons in every big game that we played. We would make it to the finals. If you looked at our record, I think we'd end up, 65-7, and all 7 losses would be to them.
Oh, wow.
It was one of those really unique situations. But then going into our minor midget years with the draft year, I was fortunate enough to have an incredible group. Actually, my captain back then was a captain of the Ottawa 67s, Travis Barron. Travis was with me from 7 years old all the way up till he was drafted. But I was very fortunate to have Jacob Chikrin and Victor Mete on my defense corps. And in minor hockey, to have those 2 players was almost a cheat code. They would go back to get pucks, and you were essentially never in trouble. It was pretty impressive to watch them as young athletes and young hockey players. And I was fortunate as a young guy coaching them to learn from them. Obviously, as a coach, you think 15-year-old kids are there to learn from their coach, and I believe they did. But at the end of the day, I learned a ton from them, and I learned how they carried themselves and how they were, accomplishing their goals and moving on to the next level. So I had that group, took them all the way up. Had some opportunities to move on in coaching after that, but I had just started a family, had my first child. It just didn't make sense. And those are decisions, again, fork in the road you got to make. And I decided to stick with minor hockey at that point. I had just been named general manager of the Junior Canadians. So now I was taking on a whole new challenge. And that's kind of what my next phase was going to be in terms of running that organization. Um,
Yeah.
After that, I had some other great players like Ryan Merkley. I don't know if you know Ryan, but Ryan was a first round pick to San Jose, another defenseman who came through our system. And then recently I had the 2004 age group, and it's their NHL draft this week. So part of the reason why I'm heading down there. But I had Ty Nelson on my team. I had Adam Fantilli at the beginning of the year, who will be a high pick in next year's draft. Pano Fimis, Michael Butchinger, some great players that'll all be drafted this week in the NHL draft.
Yeah, no, that's very exciting. And I guess one of the things I want to ask about before we kind of move on to that next stage that you kind of touched on, but what kind of things you were mentioning, like, from that, age group that you moved on from, 7 to 8 all the way to their draft year, what types of things did you learn from them, right? Because you were saying that was a big part of it. So what kind of things were you kind of noticing where you're now sharing that information with, the next crop of, hockey players, right? What were the things you're learning from these, now NHL caliber players?
Yeah, it's really just how they carry themselves and how they go about their business. Obviously they're still students at that point. Their bodies are machines. Like, in all honesty, I remember when I was playing, the game would finish and you're out of the rink within 10 minutes. You're showered, you're dressed, you're off, and you're gone. These kids have routines before, after. The stuff they're putting into their bodies is all calculated. There's people much smarter than me helping them with all those decisions. And how they manage their time. They still had to be students. They still had to be athletes. It was impressive for me to watch these kids. And I would have been about 28 at that point, coaching these kids. I was still a young guy, but to watch them and how they prepared, how they got themselves ready to play, and how they handled themselves, whether they're talking scouts, teams, agents, it was very impressive for me to sit back and just watch them operate.
Yeah, no, for sure that makes sense. And you're talking about how they had other kind of people involved. At what age group were you noticing, once these talented players, started becoming recognized? What kind of ages do you think start changing where they're starting to bring other people onto their team, where maybe it's nutrition, agent, et cetera? Like, how does that process look like?
So back then they probably would have been about Bantam, so about 15 years old. Nowadays, it's probably about 12 or 13.
Wow.
Which I'm not a massive fan of, but I get it. And it's kind of the nature of the beast right now, which is a challenge in itself. But, agents are looking at players now at 13 years old. They're talking to them, trying to get them involved in their agencies and their programs. Kids are taking care of their bodies. Like I've coached kids who would go and get stretched by, professionals before a game, which to me, again, part of the reason why I had grown up to, when I used to play, coach yelled at me to go stretch, and I'd literally just go like this with my hands and go, okay, I'm good, let's go. What a difference this last 15, 20 years has been in terms of the preparation and the way these kids approach the game of hockey nowadays.
Yeah, no, for sure. When I was in universities, I actually worked with what was it? It was like a hockey analytics app. So it was a startup, and they were creating tools for NHL scouts, NHL teams, etc. But then they end up creating a minor hockey app because they're getting so much interest from minor hockey players of these parents that are 12, 13, where they wanted a way to kind of track all the metrics of their kids. So they're like, oh, I guess there's such a demand, like we have to make a minor hockey app for these parents. And I remember even one of the stories where we were just kind of creating a promo video, right? That was the plan. And then we were trying to find parents just to have, their kid. Obviously, the kid their face wouldn't be in it, and it's not a video about the kid. And we just needed a puck to go through like a glove, like just past the goalie's glove. So the kid wouldn't be in it, just their arm. And like the mom refused to have a goal scored on, her child. And I was like, hey, like their face isn't in it. Like we just need like a small child to be in the video. And they refused, and they're like, oh, he's stretching today, and I was like, the kid's like 12, like, let him breathe, right? So it was kind of interesting just kind of see that landscape where, I was just, a university student trying to help out with a startup, and some of the things I was kind of seeing in the hockey world. I was like, wow, that's crazy. But no, it's interesting.
It is. It's funny whenever you talk about minor hockey with somebody that's not involved in it, when you start telling them some of the things that go on and how it's done, they look at you like you're crazy. And to me, that should be the biggest message that we have as a culture, that we need to change things.
Yeah. Do you mind maybe, is there like some, because a lot of people listen. So obviously I'm based in Canada and a
Yep.
good chunk of listenership is here. But a lot of the, the demographic is kind of split between Canada, the UK, USA, and some parts in Europe as well. So do you mind maybe sharing some type of those things where maybe people who are playing other sports would maybe be surprised to hear?
Yeah, the biggest thing that we see here is specialization. People are specializing in just hockey at 7 years old, and to me, that is just it's not for me. That's what I'm going to say. For me, they need to be athletes first. They need to experience different coaches, different athletic skills. Everything you do can help you as a hockey player. I think at some point, parents are almost scared that their kids are going to fall in love with another sport and it's not going to be hockey. And
Mhm.
that shouldn't be the case. They should be able to explore and do different things. And for me, I just think the different styles of coaching in different sports. And I look at my own son who's 7, and yes, he plays hockey, but he also plays rep soccer, and
Mhm.
he shows up to soccer practice. His coaches are Spanish descent, and they're speaking Spanish to him. They're kissing him on the head. They're hugging him. It's just
Yeah.
a totally different experience in the way they treat them from hockey coaches. And for me, what more of a valuable lesson for him to learn than to have these different skills and see different adults approach him in different ways and see what the best way to get the best out of him is. Um, the other thing is hockey has now become a 12-month-a-year sport for these kids at 8 years old. I don't understand that. I just don't get it. Um, your body needs time to grow. Your brain needs time to grow. You get parents, and I deal with them every single day. My kid loves it. He wants to be at the rink all the time. Yeah, I get it. I
Mhm.
understand that. But at a certain point, your kid loves being at the rink because they see the enjoyment on the parents' face and their buddy. Okay, whether it's girlfriends and their friends there, or boys and their friends are at the rink, the kids like going to the rink because their friends are there.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that's why they enjoy going there. For me, if you put them in a different environment, they'd love going there as well. Whether it's soccer, whether it's lacrosse, whether it's baseball, whether it's bike camp. One of the things that I always ask my players is at the end of the year, when we talk about their training plan, is I say, "What are you going to do this summer to be a kid?" And without a question, if I've got 17 players on my team, at least 12 of them, their response will be, well, I'm going to this gym. I'm going to work out with this guy. I'm going to skate with this guy. And I stopped them and go, no, no, no. What are you going to do to be a kid? Are you going to ride your bike? Are you going to play basketball? Are you going to camp? You're going to play video games with your friends. Like, what are you going to do to be a kid? It doesn't come natural for them. They don't know how to say it.
Yeah.
And I don't know that some of them realize that until they get a little bit older, that they
Yeah.
missed out on just enjoying their time.
Yeah, no, that to be honest, as soon as you said that, it kind of makes sense because I go to the gym here just at TD place where the 67s play, and without fail, as soon as I guess it was more during the school year for high school, junior high kids, at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, whatever time they finish school, there's always like an ingress of like these young kids. They're all hockey players. I see them all wearing their whatever team shirt. I don't even know what it is, and they look 12 years old, right? They barely hit puberty. They have sticks for arms, and I see them trying to lift weights,
Oh
do all
yeah,
these things. And to be honest, I see some of the things they're doing sometimes. I hate, like, they're gonna end up hurting themselves just because they're trying to progress themselves. Where in reality they're just gonna have a step back taken. But no,
yeah,
I can sure see that when we kind of look at it further.
yeah. Just I remember I coached Michael Butchinger, who plays in Guelph now, and
Mhm.
he's ranked to go in the second or third round in this year's NHL draft. And I remember I coached him from Pee Wee right through minor midget. And I remember Pee Wee and minor band, and I sat down with him, and I said, "Okay, Michael, what are you going to do this summer?" And he told me, and I will never forget this. He goes, "Me and my dad love to go for hikes. We just go for walks and we talk." And I was like, "What an incredible response." How much does that happen nowadays? Here's a kid who, is an excellent hockey player, very mature for his age, very well spoken. And he's just sitting there telling me, I just can't wait to go for walks with my dad. And we go on hikes. And to me,
Yeah.
it was so refreshing to hear him say that. And that's why it gives me, so much joy in watching a kid like that now be successful and have the opportunities that are going to come his way in the next couple of years.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I guess before we move on to, the next stage that you're talking about in your career, is that something that you've kind of seen where maybe the players that end up being the most successful are often those that are able to kind of step away from hockey and just enjoy a walk or being a kid when they were younger, just even enjoying other sports? Is that something that you kind of noticed?
For me specifically, yes. I would say as a whole, it's not across the board. But if I look at the kids who played on my '04 team that are eligible for the draft this week, Ty Nelson played a high level lacrosse growing up. Was played on Mimico, and I don't know the lengths he went to, but I know he's a pretty good player. Panophimus, same thing. I think they play in the same lacrosse team growing up. Michael Butchinger, who I just touched on, same type of thing. Noah Van Vliet, who played for the Hamilton Bulldogs and went to the World Cup this year, high-level soccer player. Probably could have went either way in terms of soccer and hockey. He was that talented. So as I start to look at those kids who have these opportunities and are being successful, it does start to correlate, and there is some common fixtures here that show that this is happening. The kids who are doing multi-sports and doing more than just hockey are the ones who are getting those opportunities.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess kind of moving on to that next stage of your career where you're talking about becoming the general manager of the team, what does that process look like differently, right? So obviously you're maybe not interacting with the players every day, but what
Yeah.
does it look like and how does that help you kind of progress within your career?
Yeah, so when I took over the Canadians, it was a big jump for me because I had now 8 teams reporting into me. It was my job to pick the coaches, my job to make sure that their programs lined up with our values and what we wanted to accomplish. One of the things when I stepped into that role was the previous general manager. The only reason he wasn't with us anymore is he actually passed away. He had a brain tumor and passed away on us, but he was a mentor for me all the way growing up. So for me, what I did was I just kind of kept the way he ran the organization. He allows the coaches to coach. He allows the coaches to do what they need to do with the support of our organization when and if they need it. And I think that's been a really important piece to what we've done with the junior Canadians over the last 9 years is we've brought in really good coaches. We've allowed them to do their job. We've stayed out of their way, but when they need help and they need assistance, we're there to help. We've put together a program and policies that make sure that it's foolproof right now. They do their job, we do our job, and it makes sure that the kids and the families have good experiences when they come through our program. So what kind of led me into my next phase would be, so I was coaching this '04 group with Ty Nelson and Pamela Femis and these kids, and the OHL draft was that year. And obviously, as a coach, you speak to a lot of teams. So you speak to a lot of OHL coaches, GMs, scouts. That year, North Bay wasn't doing very well in the standings, and it looked like they were going to have the number 1 or number 2 pick overall, regardless kind of how it played out. So I was having a ton of conversations with North Bay in general just about my players, Ty Nelson, Panophimus, also Adam Fantilli at the time because he had played for me 2 years prior and then left us to go to Kimball at the beginning of the year. So I was just somebody that they were bouncing ideas off. I had coached in the age group for 4 years, so I knew a lot of the kids. I knew a lot of the kids behind the scenes as well, which is important. So during those conversations, it just seemed like a natural fit. It's kind of hard to explain, but every time we would sit down and have a conversation, it just seemed that what they were trying to accomplish and what I was about aligned perfectly. They ended up making some personnel changes in December of that year, I believe. And Adam Dennis was named the general manager of the hockey club. And at the end of January, Adam approached me to come on as a consultant and help them with the draft and be eyes and ears and help them along the path, which I was excited about. But at the same time, I didn't want to fully jump in because I wanted to make sure that my players still had the opportunity to get seen by all the other teams. And sometimes if people think you're working with one team that you're going to push kids that way or which would never happen. It's always about getting the kids wherever they're supposed to go. So I ended up helping them a little bit with the draft in terms of identifying some players and some people that they should draft or maybe stay away from and those kind of things. And then COVID hit. So everything got shut down. Wasn't sure what was going to happen, but about 3 weeks into COVID, Adam approached me and asked me if I'd be interested in joining them as an assistant general manager and coming on with them and joining their staff. So I sat down with my wife and talked about how it was all going to look. And one of the beautiful things about the role was I could maintain and live in Toronto. So Adam has moved up to North Bay. Him and his family are there. This allows me to stay in Toronto and kind of be the guy with boots on the ground in the GTHL and the OMHA and this area. So it was really appealing to me because I was able to not move and kind of keep my full-time job and those kind of things that I had going on. So I ended up taking the role, and that's when everything kind of started. But we also hurry up and wait because we were in the middle of COVID. So basically for a year and a half, year and 6-7 months, there was no hockey. So I was the assistant general manager in North Bay. We were drafting players, we were scouting players, but we weren't playing hockey. So that has been an interesting experience in itself.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. And I think, everyone that we kind of had on the podcast, they all have their different versions of how, kind of COVID affected things, right? Where I know the day everything got shut down, I was actually in Toronto. I was interviewing with a couple of teams. And then as soon as I parked in Toronto, my phone blew up and said, "Hey, everything's closing down." I was like, "Oh, looks like I'm driving back to Ottawa." So yeah, it's definitely an interesting time story for everyone.
Yeah.
And then I guess, what maybe one of the last things we kind of touch on before we move on to two questions I'd like to wrap up with. Where do you see things going forward? Is this something where you like to move up within the OHL, maybe even further into NHL, something like that? What does the process look like going forward from here?
So as of right now, I think I'm as I kind of alluded to at the beginning of this, is I'm listening and I'm learning. I love the people that I work with. Adam Dennis is a true professional and works extremely hard, and we have a great relationship. My job right now is to listen and learn, and that's what I'm doing. And when and if opportunities come up, I think it's important to always have conversations and listen. But I'm very happy with working with North Bay. I'm very happy with the way I'm treated and working with the people that I work with every day. So for me, for now, I want to grow. I want to get better. I want to listen. I want to learn. And I want to see this team do some special things. So that would be my goal for the next few years here.
Yeah, for sure. That makes total sense. And I guess the way I like to wrap up every episode is I kind of have these two questions I like to ask every guest. So I'm always saying this. I'm pretty set that I'm going to live until I'm 103. I'm going to be on a rocking chair just reminiscing. So let's say you get to 103, you're on a rocking chair just reminiscing about your career to date. What is one story so far that's going to stick out to you where at 103 you're going to be like, wow, I can't believe that's something I was able to do for a living?
Yeah, I just think it's going to be back to the coaching. And I think I'll be sitting on that rocking chair, just sitting back at the kids that I've been able to coach and been able to help along the way. And, for me, it always kind of comes full circle that I was that 18, 19-year-old kid who had a lot to learn. And I've spent 17 years coaching, trying to make sure that kids that come out of my program don't make the same mistakes that I did. And I think I'd be sitting on that chair saying, I think I've accomplished for the most part what I set out to do in terms of helping kids get to where they want to get to. And I think I would just have a drink in my hand and a smile on my face.
Yeah, no, that's kind of a great way to look at it. And then the last question I like to ask, we went into the future. Now, if we go into the past, maybe we're talking to, Johnny who's, playing with Sudbury, or Johnny who just moved to Texas. What is one piece of advice that you would like to give a younger version of yourself, or maybe someone listening, that you've now learned, right? So something you wish you knew when you're younger. What's something that you would, share?
Ooh, there'd be a lot of that stuff, I think. For me, I think it's just about surrounding yourself with the right people. I think at a young age, I played junior hockey, and some of my lifelong friends were on that team, but they were much older than I was, and there was a little bit of a need to try to fit in with 19 and 20-year-old guys when I was 15, and that's probably not the best thing for a 15-year-old to do. So learning to be around people that are going to push you, support you, giving that same back to other people, I think to me is one of the most important things that I would look back on, to make sure that you've got good people in your camp and good people around you to make sure that you're going in the right direction.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I couldn't agree more with that. And that's why I'd like to end with that question. I think it's a perfect way to kind of put a bow on everything, wrap it all up, and kind of put it all together. But hey, like this has been a great episode. I think there's a lot of great information here. I was trying to write all the timestamps down for myself to kind of remember it. But yeah, unless there's anything else you'd like to share, just want to thank you for coming on.
No, I appreciate your time. Appreciate having me on. And, hopefully things go well.
Yeah, no. So yeah, I really appreciate it, and good luck to you, and also to your 04 draft class that are going to be heading to the NHL draft this week. So hopefully it all works out for them.
Yeah, thank you.
Perfect. All right. Well, that's a wrap to episode 99 of The Route. If you haven't already, subscribe, follow the podcast, check us out at The Route Sports, and tune in next week. All right. Thank you. Welcome